with Mr. Trump's election, it's certain that the interesting times are ahead. He has said that he would like to find a solution to the war in Ukraine and also would like to play a role in bringing about peace in Gaza or between Israel and the Palestinians. Workforce is required. That is the understanding of the business. So, as far as illegal immigration is concerned, well, India and the United States are on the same page. So we should look at the Trump 2.0 just as we look at any US administration, because we ultimately deal with whosoever is in power in Washington. So we need to have positivity, optimism, and a clear eyed view of what we want to achieve with this new US administration. We have no problems with the US making America great again, but our primary interest is making India great and keeping India great and making India greater. The new president would assume office on January 20th, and newspapers and media outlets would be talking a lot about this. So this is an interesting and important time to learn about India-US relations.
Hello everyone. Recently we have seen the conclusion of the much awaited US elections. The elections were full of events, and unexpectedly or expectedly there is the return or the historical comeback of Mr. Donald Trump as the 47th President of United States of America. Now, what kind of policies will be there? What will be the future of the relations with India and many of the groupings? To discuss all these kind of things and to get solutions that what may be the future of world with respect to Trump 2.0. I am joined by Anjani Kumar sir, who is the faculty of Vision IAS. Welcome sir.
Thank you, Vishal.
So sir, as we have seen that there are a lot of talks regarding this, that return or the historical comeback of Mr. Donald Trump. So now how do you see, because we have seen a history of relations with respect to India, there has been an evolution of relation, initially not that much good relations, but over a period of time we have seen the evolution of relation. So how do you see this kind of evolution?
So, Vishal, first of all, with Mr. Trump's election, it's certain that the interesting times are ahead. Mr. Trump has displayed in the past a tendency to speak or use the media in such a way that the headlines is always around him. And if you look at India-US relations, Mr. Trump is one among the series of presidents in the last 20 years under whom the relations have seen progress. In 2016, it would be instructive to remember the Prime Minister addressing the US Congress had used the phrase overcoming hesitations of history. And we see that India-US relations are described in terms of two countries or two states which were estranged democracies have now become more engaged democracy. So this evolution is by and large in a positive direction. And under Mr. Trump also, there is the prospect of good amount of progress in many areas as far as India-US relations goes. There would be certain uncertainties and certain areas where there may be more visible friction as compared to earlier, but that is part of diplomacy between two countries. How do they deal with different positions on different issues?
Right, sir. So, sir, as we are calling him like the Trump 1.0 era, so generally, like there were many predecessors also. So, when we were talking about Trump, so what is the different with respect to the foreign policy tactics that under the Mr. Donald Trump, the US is using, and how the posture is going to get changed under the leadership of Donald Trump, specifically, sir, from Trump 1.0?
So, if we have any understanding of what Trump 2.0 may look like, our reference point is his first term, as is well known, that now he has registered perhaps one of the most interesting comebacks in political history. After 120 years, he is the first president who would be serving the second non-consecutive term. In his first term, Mr. Trump was more of an outsider to Washington politics. He was considered to be an unknown entity, unpredictable. But his first term was also marked by appointments of traditionally well-versed people in the administration. So first change that we would be able to see is what kind of people he appoints to important positions like Secretary of State, etc., in the coming term. Uh, First term of Mr. Trump was marked by unpredictability insofar as he was prone to removing people in important positions like the Secretary of State. Uh, that position changed more than twice. So we see that as far as administration is concerned, Mr. Trump wants to carry an image of being a decision maker, and he wants to have a personal imprint on the decisions that he makes. And our way of understanding him should start by his rhetoric, which has been focused around the agenda of America first, which is something that he was also talking about in his first term. And again, America first is his go to principle. So, as far as the expectations and the understanding based on the past is concerned, we must expect that Mr. Trump would continue to take a strong position on issues like trade with partners like China. As far as the geostrategic elements are concerned, he has said that he would like to find a solution to the war in Ukraine, and also would like to play a role in bringing about peace in Gaza or between Israel and the Palestinians. How would he do that? That is not clear. But he has spelled out his agenda in these ways. And now, lastly, as far as, and more importantly, as far as India is concerned, uh, Mr. Trump in general has been charitable in his comments this time round, especially about the Prime Minister. So, what is being read is that this personal rapport, two strong leaders leading India and US, may go into shaping the relation in the coming 4 years, apart from the traditional diplomatic channels. So, these two would go hand in hand.
So, sir, as you have used one phrase that America first. So, sir, is it about like American isolationism, like what we have previously seen that America is not interfering that much in the global politics? So, like for the students, like can you explain briefly, like what do the Trump actually means by the America first doctrine?
So, when Mr. Trump is talking about America first, it has to be understood in two contexts. One, every president is the product primarily of domestic politics of the US. And the domestic politics of the US has been undergoing a sort of polarization between the Democrats and Republicans, the conservatives and progressives. So that polarization continues. One thing to be marked is that in the first term, Mr. Trump did not win the popular votes. He definitely won the majority in Electoral College, but this time he has won both the popular vote as well as the Electoral College majority. So, what seems to be the case is that the age group that has voted for Mr. Trump and the population section of population that has voted for Mr. Trump wants him or supports his stance on issues like immigration. So, more hawkish on immigration, especially in bordering states. If you see the swing states in the bordering areas mostly have voted for Mr. Trump. So, immigration is one issue which is rooted in US domestic politics, but it has international implications also. Second issue is the way globalization has progressed and how manufacturing has changed basis over the last 4 decades. So there is this rust belt in the United States, which has again voted in favor of Mr. Trump, where the promise of industrialization, bringing back industrialization again, has resonated. Now, again, this is rooted in domestic politics but has international implications. And as far as the outreach in foreign policy is concerned, the victory of Mr. Trump is being seen as the defeat of neoconservatives who had been active in US foreign policy since at least the George Bush era. And in this era, we have seen US actively being involved in first the global war on terrorism, then in stability efforts in Afghanistan. So, what we saw in the first Trump era was that Mr. Trump was opposed to these kinds of wars and involvement of US abroad, And he had also taken an economic point of view of the cost of these wars and the benefits being minimum, the cost being high. And he then took certain steps also. For example, the decision to have a negotiation with Taliban, which eventually led to an agreement and eventually was followed up by withdrawal of American troops from US under the Biden administration. Now they have the genesis in the Trump period. Now these three major issues, immigration, uh, industrialization and trade, and American involvement, or especially military involvement or closer involvement in issues abroad. On this, Trump seems to be different from his traditional predecessors.
So, sir, as you have talked about the immigration, the economic policies, and further the foreign policy related aspects. So, sir, let's talk about these. First, about sir immigration, because in his winning speech also he has highlighted that I will prevent any kind of like immigration or illegal immigration from any specific country. The people may come to United States, but through the legal routes. So, sir, this was highlighted, and now in the previous term also we have seen that H1B visa was one of the prominent issue that India also got impacted, because a lot of service sector is dependent upon US also with respect to the trade of services. So now sir, how the Trump 2.0 might be shaping the immigration as well as the H1B visa related rules?
So certainly, Mr. Trump's stance on immigration has been hawkish. There are two aspects to it. One is the illegal immigration, which is a very prominent issue in border areas. So Mr. Trump had been the champion of building a wall across the borders with Mexico. The second aspect of it is related with how Mr. Trump dealt with immigration as an issue. So he put in place an outright ban on immigration from certain countries, certain Muslim countries, as it was at that point in time, which was controversial. And the third aspect has been about his economic policies merged with the immigration issue, where in his first term he had been talking about buy American and hire American. So, as far as sitting in India, we look at this issue. Our interest arises from the fact that skilled Indians find US to be an attractive destination for opportunities. And this is not a one-way relation. The American industry also understand, American businesses also understand that talent or educated or skilled Indians are essential or have contributed to the economic rise of United States, particularly in the technology sector. Earlier it was information technology, now we are moving in different directions as far as technology growth is concerned. So this workforce is required, that is the understanding of the business. So as far as illegal immigration is concerned, well, India and the United States are on the same page. As far as legal immigration through legal route, especially the immigration or movement of workers is concerned, India being a net exporter of workers or labor is always keen to have ease of movement for workers. And in US, visa categories like non-immigrant visa categories like H1B visa or L1 visa are the primary conduit, and Indians, for example, were the largest beneficiaries of H1B visa. So in the first term of Mr. Trump, what was evident was that apart from his rhetoric and clamping down on illegal immigration, he had also taken certain steps which had an impact on India's interest. For example, he talked about capping the number of H1B visa and then raising the fee required for H1B visa, and then also he had been promoting the idea of buy American and hire American. Now these impinged on India's interests. So of course India took it up through the appropriate channels with the United States. And in the current term also, if the approach of Mr. Trump continues to be the same, this would be one issue that India would prominently like to take up with the new administration.
Exactly, sir. So, sir, this talks about the economic policies, because the kind of the trade volume I was just going through the data. So it was roughly around like $190 billion that we have reached to the trade with United States, and more or less the trade is in our favor. So roughly 40 or $45 billion, that is the trade surplus that India is having, and mainly because of the service industry that we are providing to the United States. So how you are seeing, sir, how the economic policies of Trump in his administration 2.0 are going to impact the relations as far as the economic policy is concerned?
So again, Vishal, the rise of leaders like Mr. Trump in the West is not an exception. it is accompanied by a certain sense of deglobalization getting support, or certainly a backlash against globalization, which is coming surprisingly for many from the global, what is called global north, countries like US or European countries. So there are concerns about livelihood, about employment, which are prominent issues in election cycle in the US. Now, apart from that, the push towards industrialization in what is called US Rust Belt is also one of the USPs of Mr. Trump's electoral call. Now, as far as trade is concerned, Mr. Trump's position has been that he is a suave, smart, intelligent businessman, and he knows how to make good deals without getting involved in emotions or rhetoric. And on that, he has accused even his predecessors of not being that smart. And his statements have been that if US is smart, that then nobody can take advantage of the US. So that gives us some idea about as to the thinking of Mr. Trump as a president and his liking. So as you, for example, refer to the numbers, those are American numbers, by the way. 191 billion in fiscal year 23 was the trade number. If you look at this year's numbers from India's perspective, our fiscal years are different. So that's why there is some difference in number, but the pattern remains the same. So our trade is around 118.27 billion US dollars for FY 23-24. In that, we have a trade surplus with the United States of 36.7 billion US dollars, and that is part of the trend. India has enjoyed access to American market, and America has been the largest export destination for India. In FY 21-22 and 22-23, US was India's largest trading partner. So this is part of the trend. Now, no matter who is the president, over the last 2 decades, this has been the trend more or less. Now, would this trend continue? Of course, this trend would continue because both are benefiting. It's not that only India's exports are rising, American exports to India are also rising. Now, as far as the approach of Mr. Trump is concerned, it seems sometimes that he becomes transactional when it comes to trade issues. So, for example, for him, this headline number of India enjoying the trade surplus and US having a trade deficit is an important number, important talking point. So, in the last tenure, for example, he had accused India of being tariff king. Now, these kinds of words are uncharacteristically strong words, which create a public perception of frictions. And then he had also pushed for greater ease of access to American products into Indian market. For example, he had continuously talked about high taxes on motorcycles like Harley Davidson in India's market. So this gives us a sense of the approach that Mr. Trump, as far as headline is concerned, takes. But eventually, what happens is that any trade negotiation would be give and take. So during the Trump administration, after a certain pushback, which also came from India, that India also identified goods on which it was ready to increase tariffs if the Trump administration, which had increased tariffs on goods like aluminum, etc., did not withdraw. So after that, eventually India and US got talking. And during the last leg of his presidency, there were talks about India and US entering into some kind of an agreement,
Right.
whereby there would be some degree of quid pro quo in the area of trade. So, translating that to the future, we see that this is one area where the approach doesn't seem to be changing. So, we may see there would be some degree of challenge for Indian diplomacy to engage in a systematic manner with the US and understand the issue and reach to an understanding whereby safeguarding India's interest. So, this is one area where we see that as far as perception is concerned, there may be some friction.
So, sir, as you're talking about certain kind of formal agreement that might be expected, so are you referring to the free trade agreement that is being talked about?
So, in general, America has not been too keen to enter into free trade agreements.
Okay.
And as far as India is also concerned, currently, if you see, we are having a rethink on free trade agreements, whether it benefits us or not. And as far as markets like America are concerned, our trade benefits by the fact that the paying capacity of the American consumer is higher as compared to other markets. And if we see our free trade agreements with Japan or South Korea, etc., we find that we have a trade deficit. So broadly, our understanding is that free trade agreements have led to increase in imports rather than benefiting India's exports. And in case of United States, it's the paying capacity of the consumer that matters, the per capita income which matters. And America also has not been too keen for a free trade agreement. So short of a free trade agreement, addressing specific areas, for example, tariffs in certain categories, for example, issues of IPR, IP protection, and for example, in certain areas, some concession regarding the market access issue to American products, medical devices, or these may be some other areas also. And apart from that, what you would see is that it has coincided with Mr. Trump's first term that the element of hydrocarbon trade has also increased or has become a prominent part of India-U.S. trade. So, if there is an opportunity for expanding trade whereby the benefits to America are also visible, those opportunities have to be sought through agreements and arrangements. So, it would be more of an adjustment, sectoral adjustment or adjustment on tariffs, etc., or in certain sectors rather than a full-fledged free trade agreement.
So, sir, basically now moving towards another most important aspect, because last administration of Trump 1.0 is also famous for that he has retreated from a lot of global organization that we have also seen, like the retreating from the Paris agreements, the reducing the kind of commitments that United States were doing, and he was like blaming the predecessors also. So, sir, as now India has engaged with United States in a lot of forums, for example, the Quad is there is IPEF, IPOI is there. So basically, can we expect certain kind of retreating from these kind of agreements? And if yes, then how they are going to impact India?
So again, this has to be divided into two aspects. One, we have to see US as a systemically important power, which in a way has shaped a lot of multilateral arrangements that we see since the Second World War. So the United Nations or the WTO or other such groupings were by and large, according to one perspective, dependent on America's support and America's weight behind them, and America's desire to shape international relations in a phase of its foreign policy when it was more outgoing. Now, Mr. Trump wants to reduce, as to be put in business terms, liabilities and increase assets. So his approach in multilateral context would also depend on that. So as far as the larger multilateral, older multilateral bodies like UN are concerned, of course, Mr. Trump withdrew from UNESCO, from WHO, from the Paris Agreement, and some changes were brought in the Biden administration also. But every American administration ultimately is working to maximize American gains. So as far as pushback against WTO is concerned, or any UN agency which doesn't seem to be toeing the line of the US is concerned, we may see it visibly in America's approach. It would be not as nuanced as Biden's approach to this. But as far as these newer kinds of arrangements are concerned, like the Quad, one has to understand that this has been part of US policy of shifting its attention to areas where it now sees its interest. So, for example, Quad is rooted in America's new interest in Asia, particularly the Pacific part of Asia. And it is during the Trump administration the term Indo-Pacific came up, and the Indo-Pacific strategy prominently was adopted, and the term Asia-Pacific was downgraded. The Biden administration continued with the Indo-Pacific approach. So that gives us an indication that across the administrations, China continues to be the number one concern of the US. And insofar as Quad's ability to counterbalance the implications of China's rise and assertion is concerned, US may see it to be useful and may continue to support the Quad. So the initiatives like Quad are going to continue to thrive. What may happen is that Quad over the years has adopted diffused focus, right? In a lot of areas, the Quad has announced cooperation, from HADR, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, to connectivity, to technology. Now, this outright security angle of cooperation has in a way been downplayed. Now, during the Trump administration, maybe Quad cooperation towards hardcore security issues may become a priority. And one interesting thing would be 2025, India would be hosting the Quad Summit. So we may soon get an opportunity to host President Trump 2.0, and then the approach would be much more clear. But by and large, geostrategic convergence in the Indo-Pacific would continue and Quad would remain relevant. Now, the second major initiative that we are talking about is IPEF. So, as far as the American approach to the issue of trade is concerned, America now wants to consolidate the emerging trends. So, America as a developed country would continue to push for agreements where there is concern for environment, labor regulation, etc. So, non core trade issues are part of IPF. But IPF was flexible. So, for example, it has 4 pillars, and India adopted the approach of not joining the trade pillar. Now, whether that flexibility continues under Trump administration or not is a question which is yet to be answered. We have only one reference to go back to this, that under President Trump there was significant opposition to America getting involved in agreements like Trans-Pacific Partnership. So, if there is no outright benefit visible to the Trump administration in IPEF, support to that may seem to be downgraded. And second, its flexibility would be questionable. But the answer to that would be clear only once we see who are the people in charge of policy and official statement coming on this.
So as we are waiting and right now following the policy of wait and watch, so how India should look towards the new administration, like how Indian outlook should be towards the Trump 2.0 and how Trump 2.0 will be shaping its outlook towards India specifically.
So, we should look at the Trump 2.0 just as we look at any US administration, because we ultimately deal with whosoever is in power in Washington, right? So, one good thing about the relation is, and one of the pillars of the relation is, that it has bipartisan support in the United States and it has bipartisan support in India. No matter who is in power, relation between India and US is going to be important. So, of course, with optimism. Second is that we should see that about Mr. Trump, there is a great degree of inquisitiveness in India and interest in India. If you look at, for example, the data on Google search. So, there would be greater awareness, visibility at least in terms of what Mr. Trump does vis-a-vis India. So, the Indo-US relation in public discourse would have that kind of interest, that kind of prominence. Third is at the official level, we saw Prime Minister immediately tweeted and congratulated Mr. Trump, President-elect Trump, and then had a phone conversation with him. Details of it were provided by the spokesperson of Ministry of External Affairs. So, the second aspect is looking with optimism based on the rapport, personal rapport between these two leaders who like to project an image of being decision makers. So, that is the second strong optimistic factor in this particular relation. And prior to his election, Mr. Trump made certain positive remarks regarding Prime Minister Modi. So, again, that also is a positive. But we should also prepare for pushing ahead with our own requirement. For example, Mr. Trump was a keen supporter of India buying US defense equipments. And it is also true that the designation of major defense partner was provided under President Obama, but it unfolded under President Trump with the signing of agreements ranging from COMCASA to BECA, and India being put in the strategic trade authorization list 1. So, defense trade has increased. So, our issue currently is the supply bottlenecks in the GEF 404 engines, which we require for Tejas Mk1A. So, we have to be very clear eyed about our objectives, that this is something that we have to gain from our relationship with the US. And in turn, we should also be cognizant with the fact that US would also be pushing forward with its desire for India to acquire US aircrafts, the new category of aircraft that we are looking at. So, they would be pushing for sale of big ticket equipments like F-21 fighter aircrafts. So, the third thing is, as I said, awareness about where our interest lies and where US interest lies and where is the meeting point between the two. And the next thing that is very clear, which is associated with domestic politics, international approach of the US, is what happens to issues like climate change or renewable energy cooperation. So, renewable energy cooperation had emerged as an important area of emphasis during the Biden administration. But Mr. Trump is not very keen supporter of renewable energy projects. So, in that context, the importance of nuclear energy or civil nuclear cooperation arises. So, we should be looking towards possible opening of cooperation or expansion of cooperation in areas like nuclear energy from a renewable energy standpoint. So, we need to have positivity, optimism, and a clear eyed view of what we want to achieve with this new US administration.
Exactly. So, sir, what you are suggesting is optimism will be there, but certainly India should be ready for certain kind of pushbacks also, because
Yes.
what US under the Trump 2.0 will be going for is certain kind of like negotiation or the harder negotiation for the
Right.
US and to make America great again, as they are saying.
Right. We have no problems with the US making America great again, but our primary interest is making India great and keeping India great and making India greater.
Yes, sir. So, sir, thank you very much, sir, because we have discussed a lot of series of things that the Trump 2.0 can generate, and there is a lot of curiosity among the students also to get the clarity about these kind of things.
No doubt, this is interesting. Thank you, Vishal. And students must keep on reading. This is a new beginning. The new president would assume office on January 20th, and newspapers and media outlets would be talking a lot about this. So, this is an interesting and important time to learn about India-US relations.
So, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Have
Thank
a
you,
good day,
Vishal.
sir. So, with this, we came to an end to this particular conversational video regarding India-US relations in the wake of Trump administration 2.0 and the recent elections. So, for more such interesting topics on international relations, stay tuned with Vision IAS. Thank you.